Entonces, para que liberen el nervio, pues vamos a empezar con alguien que nos ha ayudado desde la primera edición de este evento. De hecho, a él debemos de culpar por tener un evento. ¿Listo? Por tener un evento, fue su idea tener un evento. Y entonces Steve dijo, pues ¿por qué no hacemos un evento en León en donde promovamos a los emprendedores? Y fue su idea. Entonces les pido un gran aplauso para Steve Dauphin, que va a presentar.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. Good to see you. Now, what I don't understand is why when Adrian comes up, he gets a big grand entrance with a smoke machine, and then I come up and he says, hey, come on up, Steve. It's okay. So, well, Adrian left out some important points. Actually, this event, this whole connection with LEÓN started about in 2017 when one of your former presidents of Mexico sat down with Bud Kirchner, and they talked about economic development and entrepreneurship as part of it, and some of the things that the Kirchner Fellowship was doing in the U.S., and your former president said, I want that program, and I want it in León, Mexico. And so we set about to do it. But we wouldn't be here at all if it weren't for the fact that early on, our first year, we selected 3 amazing young people to help us be the first Kirchner Fellows here in Mexico. One of those fellows was then PhD candidate Adrian Garcia, who was in our first group of fellows, and they did a great job. So good, in fact, that we said, okay, let's make this thing permanent, and you guys run it. So it's super important, and Adrian always seems to leave that out, but without him and all those folks that have worked with him, we wouldn't be here having this event at all. Also want you to keep in mind that this event and the activities that have happened in Mexico have really become the global template for everything that the Kirchner Foundation does around food and agriculture globally. Since it started here, we have so things that were developed here have been replicated now in Costa Rica. We have a very advanced program up and running that was modeled largely on this. But we've also been in 25 countries and always looking back to the things that happened here in León to get it started. So I do want, before I even start, I want to thank Dr. Adrian Garcia. I want to thank all those folks that have helped him, and certainly the city of León, which is really kind of the innovation catalyst for most of what we've done globally. So please give me a round of applause for the city of León. All right, I'm not going to mess with the clicker because it wasn't working, so I'll just ask the folks in the booth to advance the slides. So next slide, please. All right, so we're going to cover 3 things today and then 1 bonus topic, okay? So the categories are venture capital and entrepreneurship for the rest of us, righteous profit, twists and turns, and then we'll have these 2 generational disruptions that I want to talk about very quickly that are kind of current events. All right, next slide. All right, so we're done. Okay, all right, we'll see. That is, in fact, the last slide right there. So, all right, I'll do my best to do it by memory then. All right, so in a minute, I'm confident the slides are going to come back. I am going to ask you to raise your hand if you have seen one of the television programs. There's going to be some logos that are going to pop up. That is the last slide. If you could go all the way back to the first slide, that would be great. Oh, that's it. Now 1 more forward. Stop. Okay, fantastic. All right, so I'm going to show a picture, and it's going to be some logos of some things, and I want you to raise your hands if you've seen any of those programs. All right, next slide. All right, there we go. So raise your hand if you've seen any of these television shows. Oh, well, that's just about everybody. That's fantastic. And so you've got Shark Tank, which we're kind of doing a little Shark Tank here today because we've got the sharks down there, or the dragons if you prefer Dragons' Den. We've got that. And then the TV show. Raise your hand if you've seen the TV show Silicon Valley. Have you seen that on HBO? Okay. All right. So everything that you've learned about venture capital that you learned on those shows, I want you to forget about. Okay? This is not real venture capital. What you see here is great TV. You can learn a lot from Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. There are things to be learned, but it's not real venture capital. And again, for those of you who are young and you're kind of new to all of this, keep in mind that venture capital is kind of the money and the resources that go in to the entrepreneurial companies, the young people that have great ideas, and those two things come together, and that's usually what can create real businesses. But that's not real venture capital. What is real venture capital is this right here. This is real venture capital. Real venture capital. So other than Silicon Valley and New York and Boston and maybe London and Zurich, the rest of us, and I'm not from one of those places, do venture capital and entrepreneurship very differently. All right? On these TV versions or in Silicon Valley, the way it goes is this. It'll be 2 or 3 people. This is the vision, okay? This is the myth that they share with us, that we all start to think we have to follow or pursue this myth. The myth is 3 people in a garage, they invent a thing, it's going to be massive and huge and change the world. They go see, there's a particular road, it's called Sand Hill Road. They go down there and they see all these venture capitalists and they say, wow, this is going to change the world. Here's $5 million, here's $10 million, here's $20 million, let's get going and let's go do it. And within 3 years, it's a giant company and it goes public and they're billionaires and they're on TV and it's Mark Zuckerberg and all of those people. Okay, yes, it happens, but it is so infinitesimally small, the likelihood that that will happen to any of us. It's completely irrelevant. All right, real venture capital is what's happening here. So the vision, this is a better vision to have in your head. Not 3 people in a garage, go get $10 million and do a huge thing. Forget that one. The one that the rest of us need to think about is something more like this. All right, is that okay? Better? Okay, fantastic. All right, this is more realistic. Here's realistic. Someone's got a job, a full-time job, but they go through life and they see a problem that drives them crazy. And they say, this just drives me nuts. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. This could be done better, this could be done better. And they say, without quitting their job, they start working on it and they develop maybe some software, or maybe it's a piece of hardware or technology that can solve the problem that they care about. And they work on it at night and weekends and they get a little money from friends and family and they put the thing together and it works or it doesn't work and they fix it and they move a little bit further along. They still haven't quit their job yet, all right? And then they find out, okay, I think I've got something where we can make some money, where we can make a profit. And then they maybe go to part-time. And then they go a little bit further, and then finally they start a business and they go full-time and they commit to it. And then they go see people like me or the judges here or the fellows, and they say, I need some help and I need some money, and they build a business from there. And they try to get profitable as quickly as they can, where they're making money. All right? So it's not about raise money, raise money, raise money, raise money. It's about do some stuff, raise some money, do some more stuff, get profitable. And then you don't have to raise any more money. That's real venture capital. That's the venture capital for 99% of us in the world. So when you see this stuff on TV or when you read it, it's fun, it's entertaining, but don't get hooked on it because it's not real for us. This is real. Okay? Cool. All right, next slide. Now, one little twist on it, our firm, Bonaventure Capital, we started in 1998. We've been working in close coordination with Kirchner for a long time. We were doing kind of non-Silicon Valley venture capital for a long time. And about 10 or 12 years ago, and if some of you were here last year, you may have heard me mention this, but I think it's worth saying again. About 10 or 12 years ago, we took a look at our financial performance. What were the companies that did the best after we invested with them? So we look for cool entrepreneurs and teams, and we put money in them, and some succeed and some fail. And when we looked back and we said, how did we do? We did the best when the management team was focused first and foremost on solving a problem, something they cared about, something that drove them crazy. The second thing was getting rich. They didn't do it to get rich. They got rich if they solved the problem. So solve the problem first. If you do that, then you get rich. We did not do as well. We did not make as much money when the only thing they care about was getting rich. So we said, well, why don't we just focus on the teams that are trying to solve a problem? Because generally, it's a problem that's good for all of us if they solve it. And so we began doing something called impact investing. We didn't even know what it was. but looking for companies that were solving problems that mattered and passion-driven teams. And that's what I think we have here, and largely in the ag tech space, we see a lot of that. All right, next slide. So if you're in the audience, we certainly have 12 fantastic teams here, and some of them are doing exactly this already. But for the venture capital, for the rest of us, for the entrepreneurship, for the rest of us, the first thing we got to do is get really smart. How does it work? Let's not make the dumb mistakes. Don't go raise money if you're an entrepreneur from some bad guy or somebody that doesn't know what they're doing. Find out what it looks like to do it right. There are all kinds of cool programs. The Kirchner Investment Academy is just one of them. But find out how it works. Get smart. Find your problem. We talked about that. And then find some way to get paid to solve it. Find some way to get money for solving the problem. Create value by solving the problem to such a degree that someone will open their wallet and give you money for solving the problem, okay? That's very important if you're gonna have a profitable business. And then lastly, after that, you can attract resources. All right, next slide. All right, point number 2, and this one's my favorite. All right, righteous profit, all right? And again, for those of you who are kind of new to some of this entrepreneurship and venture capital stuff, just to be clear, profit and revenue are not the same thing. Revenue is what you got paid. Profit is how much money did you make after you've paid all of the expenses. All right, so earning your first dollar of revenue is important when you have your business, and certainly put that dollar or that peso up on the wall. That's great. But the real dollar that matters is the first dollar of profit, which is when you've got enough of the revenue, you've paid all your expenses, and there's one left over for you. That's the magic moment when you are profitable, and that's really the thing to focus on. But there are different kinds of profit. All profit isn't created equal. And there are really 3 kinds of businesses in the world about how they think about earning their profit. All right, one, you've got a business, and the entrepreneur or the owner of the business asks really one question when they make decisions, and that question is it legal? That's what they care about. That's fine. But most businesses tend to lean toward that way of thinking. Is it legal? If it is, I'll do it. All right? Another set of businesses will ask a second question, which is this the right thing to do? Is it legal, and is it the right thing to do? All right? That produces a different set of outcomes. Do I treat the planet right? Do I treat my people right? Do I treat my vendors right? All right, do I respect my customer? Is it the right thing to do? Now, that second question is important, I believe, and I think it's fundamentally important to any company that we back, is that they're thinking that way. And 1, it's good, but 2, you tend to build things that last for the long run. You're building something that could be a great company for the long run rather than just something that's quick and saying, is it legal? Now, sometimes the people who only ask the question, is it legal, win. And so we don't always win if we're asking, is it legal and is it the right thing to do, or is it the right way to do it? But that's what I'm encouraging you to do, and I believe it's the better path to building long-term businesses. I mentioned that there are 3 groups. Of course, the third group doesn't ask either question, and they just do whatever in the hell they want to do, and those guys are very bad actors. Now, we're not the only ones who've been thinking about this. There are lots of great organizations, and you can study more and learn more about it. There's a group called the Global Impact Investing Network. That's a great group. It's great resources. There's things called B corporations. It's when you form your business, you become a B corporation, which means you are going to embed in the way you structure your business to care about the planet and people and other things. Fantastic book, Conscious Capitalism, talks about all of this. And of course, the ethos of Kirchner, which has been this way for 40 years, which is the idea of earning and returning and building great businesses. All right, next slide. There are also lots and lots and lots of capital sources now that think the way that I just described. This is a recent graphic of funds, venture capital funds that are focused on impact. They're trying to find businesses that are solving important problems and doing it the right way. And this is really great news, that the big money in the world is starting to think this way. Now, there's probably less of this than there is about the other kind of money, but these are a lot of funds, and some of these funds are $500 million or $250 million. These are big funds, and so that's great news. But we act like all of this is kind of new, and it's really not new. It's a very, very old concept, this concept of righteous profit. In fact, the earliest I've studied, I've tried to look for it in economic literature, and the earliest that I can find of anyone talking about how to make money the right way, next slide please, is 2,500 years ago. I went one too far, with Confucius. So Confucius was talking about this 2,500 years ago about how to make a righteous profit. It's really fantastic. And if you if you earn your profit the right way, you get to feel really good about that. It's okay to have it. It's okay to be rich. You made it the right way. That's good. Now we have a wealthy person who has a lot of money, who gives a damn about everything else, that's likely to go do good things with it. So this notion of righteous profit, I want you to think about as you're starting about your business. I'm going to earn it the right way, and it's okay if I make a lot of it, and if I make a lot of it, I'm going to do something good with it. All right? That is so core. That is not what you hear in Silicon Valley, typically, but it's what the rest of us need to be thinking about, because great businesses can have a fantastic positive impact on the planet. So one cool wrinkle, next slide, please. And this is a fund I've been doing some sub-advising with this fund. It's new, and it's a new kind of fund in the U.S., and it's called the 1 Cent Opportunities Fund. And this is really neat. Now, and it's not, now this particular fund has a Christian focus. There are other funds around the world that are thinking this way that aren't necessarily Christian. So I'm not trying to say this is a Christian thing or not a Christian thing. This group just happens to be focused on Christian investors. And this is kind of cool. Think about this. So what they're doing is they're going to these individuals, typically who have a lot of money, and they say, oh, I want to do something, I want to take care of my money. And this company, 1 Cent, will sit down with them and say, okay, so you're a wealthy person, you've made a lot of money. And again, this is in the context of their Christian faith. They'll say, so why do you have all that money anyway? Like, why does God give you that money? It's kind of not yours anyway. Why don't you do something good with it? Like, why don't you put it to work rather than just investing in the stock market? Invest in companies, young companies that are doing impact things. And that's what this fund is all about. This fund is about people taking some of their capital that's been just in stocks and bonds and saying, I want to try to do something affirmatively good with it. And so there are more and more of these funds happening, and this is a great trend, and hopefully if you're conducting your business well, these kinds of funds and capital sources can help fuel your growth. I think that's really cool, and I really love the concept of it. All right, next slide. Okay, this is the third one, this is the last one, and then a little current events. Twists and turns. All right, you're starting your business, you guys are just getting going, you have a vision, that's what we're going to do, that's our plan. The one thing I know, and you got to have a plan. You got to have a great plan. But the one thing I know is that is not where you're going to end up. It is not where you're going to end up. You can't believe all the twists and turns that are going to happen over the course of your business. And so I want to tell you an example of a company that I've worked with now for about 6 or 7 years. And I'll try to go through their history kind of quickly. But what I want you to think about is the twists and turns and being open to them as they happen to your business. Okay? So next slide. So this is a really great company. It was actually out of Saudi Arabia. I met them at a contest like this. They actually finished third. They got a big check. They did great. So what did they do? What was their initial concept? Well, this guy was a professor at the university, and he had this idea that, hey, what if we could, because it's Saudi Arabia, right? It's a lot of hot and dry, not a lot of fresh water. And they said, how could we get crops to grow in salty soil or even salt water? And his idea, which is based on his research, was, so what if we found the root stocks of plants that are cousins of the things we like to eat, and we marry them with something that's salt tolerant. So what he did was he found tomatoes that we like to eat, and they looked all over the world, kind of like Indiana Jones, literally went all over the world to find a relative of the tomato plant that was growing in salt water. And they found a little tomato plant that wasn't edible, but it was on the Galapagos. and its little roots were always being splashed with salt water. And they did lots and lots of fancy genetic testing. Now, they didn't do genetic modification. They just basically accelerated breeding from a grafting perspective, and they figured out which of them could live together. If you took that and you could graft it onto that, which would work. That was kind of the super genius part. And they found it, and they did that. And those tomatoes were grown in salt water. All right, and that was the start of the company. I'm like, wow, that's cool. That could be really huge. So they started the business. They won the prize. And it got them off and running. And today they don't grow any tomatoes, but the company's doing really well, all right? Because they got into the business and they realized, wow, growing stuff's really hard. We're more, excuse me, we're more technology oriented. Growing stuff's hard. Let's kind of focus on that. But one of the things they also realized was that the greenhouses where they were trying to grow some of these tomatoes, if they weren't open field, it was just too hot. And they needed to find some way to get the temperature down inside of the greenhouses. So that was a new problem that came up. So next slide, please. So they went to another professor. This professor, Professor Derya Baran, she's from Turkey, but she was also working at the university. And she had developed a technology, accidentally, I might add. She was trying to develop a solar panel that was transparent, so that the sun could go through something, but also generate electricity. That's pretty cool. And she actually figured out how to do it, but it's really expensive, so it doesn't work. But what she accidentally bumped into was that if she did certain things with certain elements in the solar cell, it would block the heat that was going through it, but not necessarily block the light that the plants needed. So the light would go through that the plants need, but the heat light, the part of the light spectrum that the plants didn't need, would not go through. And you could dramatically cool a greenhouse if you had that additive in the roof. All right? Amazing. And literally, you could walk on it. When you walk under it, the sun you're still in the sun, but it's cooler instantly. So that's kind of neat, but she bumped into it. All right, so what they did was the tomato guy said, we need this problem, and they said, well, let's partner up with her, and they added her to the team, all right? And as time passed, her technology became the thing that was kind of the best business model. And her technology has become what the company is. Next slide. So today, they actually have 3 technologies inside of this company. They've changed the name to Iris. It was Red Sea Farms. And it has these 3 pieces. So there's light tuning. That's what they call what I just described. The ability using a nanoparticle inside of a plastic or a polymer to tune the light to do what you want it to do. That's now the core business. There's the plant genetics piece, which they still have, but it's so crazy expensive to monetize that they're going to have to sell that. And that's okay. Who knows? We'll see how much money they get for that. But that's not going to be their core business. You need a big player like a Bayer or Monsanto or Syngenta. That's a big company game, and they're going to do that. And then we've got this piece right here, which we had to develop some sensors that could go inside the greenhouses to tell us what the heck was going on with the plants and in the conditions, because the commercial sensors out of Europe were melting inside of the greenhouse in Saudi Arabia. They were literally melting. And so they had to, by necessity, develop their own sensor array. Now, that's not core to the business. So right now, and maybe you guys can help me with this, right now, we're trying to figure out how to spin this company, this part of the business out and create a separate company. And it would be really great if that company was based in Mexico or another relatively hot and dry climate. And Mexico is one of the big markets for these guys now. Morocco, Egypt, Spain, and Mexico are the biggest markets. So if you know of some really young and hungry entrepreneur that wants to help that loves sensors and loves tech and Internet of Things, point them my way. That'd be great. Next slide. So one last thing I would encourage you to do, if this story is interesting to you, is to go to secondsky.com, secondsky.com, go to their website and watch the little video. This is the professor, and she got interviewed by CNN, and she's talking about what she's doing, and it is so cool. All right? And these are the various products that they have. So just to recap, you're starting your business, you don't know which way it's going to go, that's all right. Now that doesn't mean that just because we don't know what the future is going to be and we can't predict the future, it doesn't mean that we don't try to predict the future. We still try to predict the future. We know we're going to fail, but we still try to predict the future and say, this is where our business is going to go and this is how we're going to get there. So again, I'm not saying you just take what comes. You do your best to control that, but at the end of the day, you don't control it. So keep that in mind. All right, last slide, or last section. All right, generational disruption. So this is current events. I was just in Silicon Valley for about a week. I've been in Europe for about 2 weeks, talking to all sorts of folks about kind of what the heck is going on in the world, what the heck's going on in venture capital, what the heck's going on in technology. And of course, the first one you're going to know. Next slide, please. And this is a generational moment. This is a generational moment. You know, the birth of the internet was a generational moment, a transformative moment. This is one as well. Now, in Silicon Valley, they're right now, real time, they're throwing 10, 20, $30 million at young companies that are trying to play at the highest levels of the AI game, all right? We can't compete with that, all right? But they don't care about smaller things, all right? They are only caring about the giant things. And as we know, AI is going to influence everything, all right? And so it's really a great moment to be starting a business because you're going to develop your systems and processes for your business based on this new tool, this amazing tool that didn't exist a year ago that we could use, all right? And it's such an advantage to be starting now rather than starting 2 years ago because you'll be thinking about this all the way. So I would just encourage you, use it, use it, use it, use it. Use the tool, use the tool, use the tool, okay? Figure out how you develop your business the smartest, most efficient way. So this is a great moment. Obviously, you guys will figure out how to work this. You don't have to be an AI company. You just have to be an AI user, like a hardcore AI user. All right. So that's generational disruption 1 that's happening right now. Generational disruption 2 is, next slide, is that guy. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, I asked AI to make that for me. I said, I need an outline of Trump. I want his hair big. Make it kind of a simple profile, and it gave me that. It was like one of my first ones. I was pretty pleased with that. All right. Okay. So I'm not going to be political. I'm just going to try to be a business person. I'm not sure how we ended up with a 9-year-old narcissistic president of the United States who's temperamental, who's kind of genius, kind of crazy, but that's who we've got. And he is disrupting everything at a level I did not think was possible. In my lifetime, I never thought the things that would happen are happening. Now, and my wife and I, we talk about, again, we're not huge fans. We try to sometimes say, okay, let's just not be negative all the time. Let's focus on what might be a good outcome. Like what might be a good outcome? There's all this negative stuff we're talking about, but what might be a good outcome based on this disruption? Because the disruption is real, and it's affecting everybody. Like our businesses are struggling because we don't know how to plan. I mean, so tariffs one day, not the next day, we don't know. You know, we got stuff coming from Europe, it's profitable. Oh, no, the tariff's on, turn around. You know, send it to Morocco. So we're all dealing with that, all right? But it's real, and we got to be smart, and we've got to think about it. But not just to think about the negatives. So if we can think kind of at the next step, are there possibly some positives? And so the two that I think are relevant to this conversation as we think about AgTech, and particularly we think about kind of the Canada, US, North America market, which is what we're in. We're heavily linked. These are kind of two of the big mega themes that he's pushing. One, of course, is for the U.S. to become less dependent on China. All right? And Mexico's been a beneficiary of that. We actually talked about that at this conference 4 years ago, how that might be, or actually during Trump 1, so maybe in the very first conference, that some of that stuff was going to move to Mexico out of China, and a lot of that happened. But that continues, this kind of U.S. pulling back from dependency with China. The other thing that's happening, and again, I was just talking about this with lots of folks in Switzerland, is that it's kind of forcing Europe to get together in a way that hasn't happened in a long time, maybe ever, all right? Because the U.S. is so unreliable right now that it's requiring, and Rod, I would love your comments on it when you get a chance, but is it making Europe, will it make Europe in some way a tighter economic entity, all right? So what does that mean for us? I could be totally wrong on this. I could be totally wrong, because again, we can't predict the future, but my prediction is that once we get to a post-Trump era, next slide, please. Next slide, please. I think we're going to see the tightest economic alignment that has ever happened with Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. I think the U.S. will be largely extracted from much of its dependence on China. I think Europe will be more integrated, and I think that cooler heads will prevail on the other side of this. I could be wrong. It's an educated guess. But I really think that as you're thinking about your business 3, 4, 5 years from now, it could be an incredibly robust, dynamic, coordinated market that we all have to work with. I certainly hope that's the case. I think it makes too much economic sense, and hopefully that'll happen. All right, again, could be wrong, could be right. So next slide. So that wraps up my remarks. I don't know if you want to do a question or two or not, but I'm very grateful to be here. We can't control all of that stuff, but what we can control is build great businesses. We're here to help these 12 companies. We want to do everything we can to help you succeed. You got a room full of people who want to help you, so we got work to do. We can do great work today, but thank you very much. I really appreciate a chance to talk to you guys.
Un aplauso, muchas gracias, Steve. Si bien no tenemos tiempo para preguntas, de todas formas vamos a tener que hacerlo porque van a pasar la computadora para acá para ahorrarlo del clicker. Entonces, en lo que hacemos el cambio tecnológico, ¿alguien tiene alguna pregunta que quiera hacerle a Steve? A ver, te paso el micrófono.
Hi, Daniel Sanchez from Nat5. What is your ideal or the best company that you or Bonaventure wants to invest in? I mean, you mentioned the type of companies you invest in, but what is like the ideal candidate? ¿Cuál es el candidato ideal para ustedes en cuáles invierten, no? Como la ideal.
That's a great question, and that's one of the absolute first questions you should ever ask, and hopefully you can do your homework before and find out what do they like to invest in, right? And so what we look for, so I look for a passion-driven team, all right, that's really committed to solving their problem, whether it's making an intersection work in a better way or growing some new crop or whatever it is. I want them to be crazy passionate about solving that problem. I want them to be very candid with us, very truthful with us. What's good, what's bad. Don't surprise me. Don't sell too hard. Like, don't oversell. I know you got to be excited about what you know, but don't oversell, because it's a long-term thing, right? We've got to work together if we invest, we're going to be partners for 3, 5, 7, 9 years. We've got to have a lot of trust. So I look for the passion. I look for that transparency. Obviously, they got to be competent. That would be great. Now, we also look for revenue. We have a revenue requirement. So for our fund to invest, a company's got to probably have at least $250,000 US dollars, maybe 500,000. So we're not going to do the risky stuff of the startups, but we'll still invest before a company is profitable. So we typically come in when they're at 250 or 500,000 of revenue. We think we're really good at helping a company go from like $1 million of revenue to 10, or from 2 million to 20. That's where we think we add the most value. There are other firms that are better than us of going from 20 million to 200. That's kind of a different thing in terms of scaling. So we look for those kind of right in that spot. Generally in the U.S., but not limited to the U.S. Great question. And we're probably out of time, I think. Yeah, one more?
Sí, sí tenemos tiempo de
Maybe-
una más. Voy.
Hello. In Spanish or in English?
English, please.
English, please.
Mi español es muy mal.
So, we have a very technical and scientific team, but we have a problem that
Okay.
we want to translate we want to translate a very like technical and biological like terminology
Yes,
terminology
yeah.
to people that, for example, wants to give us money, for example, no?
Right.
And we are struggling because sometimes we don't have the touch or the abilities to like pass from here
Yep.
to the next level. So what can we do?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, it's you've got a very technical thing that you do.
Yes.
It's a little bit difficult to explain. That's a very nice way of saying that guys like me aren't smart enough to understand what guys like you do. So that's okay. Is that correct? Is that part of the issue? Is how do you kind of, teach us what you do? Is that to raise the capital to go to the next level? Is that it?
Yes. For example, we are Rubisco and we at Bioris want to want to make we want to make something like, for example, biotechnology.
Yeah.
But we need to raise money.
Okay.
And we have to explain it, for example, to a government. And sometimes sometimes our government are gonna tell us, oh, that's really cute,
Yeah.
nice. But how? Sometimes we are gonna explain it, and for us it's like that makes sense, and we are gonna make money from that. But sometimes they're not.
Well, look, I think you're asking the right questions, and before I answer, and I'm not sure I've got a great answer for you, but I want to point out a couple of things that he did that was so good, okay? And people don't think about this. When you're like, that is a perfect conversation to get to know someone who's an investor. And who would have thought that the way to start was, I got a problem. Rather than I'm smart. He started with, I got a problem, maybe you could help me with it. All right, totally disarming, all right? Great way to start the relationship. Put me on a different footing completely, which is again, I don't know if you did it intentionally or unintentionally, but it's a really great strategy to hint. I mean, if you just show a little bit of weakness, that's truthful and transparent, but you also can begin to build a little rapport with those potential funders. Now, exactly how to communicate a very complicated idea to folks who don't understand it as well as you do, boy, that's tough, and you'll have to work on it. One thing that Bud Kirchner is a big believer in, though, and he always said this to me was, and I'm not sure the term in Spanish, but analogy, or even you could even use a metaphor, but if you can think of a thing that says, it's kind of like this.
All right.
Here's the thing we do, it's kind of like this. That can really help someone and it helps you be able to articulate what you do, but it also can really help them to begin to understand, and then you can unveil the technical stuff as you need to.
All right.
All right, but that's a great approach. I think we're past time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
I hope
much.
you'll have a great day, okay? Let's do it.